Karl Marx's Das Kapital stands as more than just an economic treatise. It's an intellectual expedition into the veiled machinery of capitalist society. Beneath the surface of markets and money lies a complex system of hidden forces quietly shaping our economic lives and social relations. Marx embarked on a mission to decode these enigmatic laws of motion, the concealed mechanisms that drive capitalism forward. But what truths await beyond the familiar narratives of supply and demand? What unseen dynamics truly govern our economic world? Join us as we venture past the obvious, unmasking the surprising and profoundly relevant revelations that lie at the heart of Das Kapital. Insights that continue to illuminate the inner workings of our modern world. When most people think of capitalist exploitation, they envision factory floors and grueling work shifts. But Marx urges us to look beyond these visible spaces into what he called the hidden abode of production, a vast network of social and historical conditions that make exploitation possible. To understand capitalism's true nature, Marx argues, we must first confront its violent origins through what he termed primitive accumulation. Forget the mythology of industrious entrepreneurs building wealth from scratch. The real story involves the brutal enclosure of common lands, the forced displacement of peasant communities, and the systematic dispossession of people from their means of survival. Consider the English Enclosure Acts, centuries of legislation that transformed communal lands into private property, creating a landless working class. Or examine colonial conquest, where indigenous peoples were violently separated from their territories, feeding European industries insatiable appetite for resources and labor. The transatlantic slave trade wasn't a mere historical footnote. It was fundamental to capitalism's emergence. The state played a crucial role in this process. Laws weren't neutral. They actively enforced new property rights, suppressed resistance, and criminalized those who sought alternatives to wage labor. Vagrancy laws, for instance, targeted the dispossessed, forcing them into factory work under threat of punishment. But this hidden abode isn't just historical, it persists today. It encompasses the entire architecture of power that enables modern capitalist production, legal frameworks, social institutions, and power dynamics that maintain exploitation. Marx reveals that exploitation isn't simply an economic transaction within factory walls. It's systemic, woven into society's very fabric through centuries of struggle and maintained by powerful institutions. Understanding this hidden dimension shows us how capitalism's reach extends far beyond the workplace, shaping the fundamental conditions of our lives through mechanisms we rarely see or question. The exploitation we observe in today's workplaces is merely the visible tip of a much larger iceberg, one whose true dimensions Marx helps us comprehend. Beyond the visible economy of wages and profits lies an invisible engine powering the capitalist system, the realm of social reproduction. Marx identified this crucial sphere of unpaid labor performed largely outside the formal economy, work that sustains not just individuals, but the entire workforce itself. Consider the daily tasks that maintain human life: cooking, cleaning, childcare, emotional support. These activities, predominantly performed by women without wages, aren't peripheral to capitalism. They're foundational. Without this hidden labor, the paid workforce simply couldn't function. Think about how workers' energy is replenished daily. After exhausting themselves in factories and offices, how do they return the next day ready to work? Through the invisible labor of social reproduction. Meals must be prepared, clothes laundered, homes maintained. All essential tasks that capitalism depends on, but doesn't compensate. Even more critically, consider the generational renewal of labor power. Children must be born, raised, educated, and cared for to create the next generation of workers. These aren't merely personal or family matters. They're essential economic functions that capitalism requires but refuses to fully acknowledge or compensate. Marxist feminists expanded brilliantly on these insights, revealing how capitalism effectively subsidizes itself by externalizing social reproduction costs onto households, particularly women. This unpaid labor becomes an invisible source of surplus value, a hidden mechanism of profit generation that goes unrecognized in traditional economic accounts. This division of labor isn't just economic, it's deeply gendered, reinforcing social norms that assign domestic and care responsibilities primarily to women. By masking the economic significance of this work, capitalism perpetuates both class and gender inequalities simultaneously. Thus, capitalism rests not just on exploited factory labor, but on a vast mountain of unpaid social reproductive work, a hidden engine without which the entire system would grind to a halt. Understanding this reveals how exploitation extends far beyond the workplace, shaping intimate aspects of our lives in ways we rarely recognize. The exploitation we observe in today's workplaces is merely the visible tip of a much larger iceberg, one whose true dimensions Marx helps us comprehend. In the midst of the Industrial Revolution, Karl Marx wasn't just analyzing his present, he was peering into humanity's technological future. In a remarkable section of his notebooks known as the Fragment on Machines, Marx revealed himself as a prophet of automation, foreseeing how technology would fundamentally reshape both capitalism and human society. Imagine a world where machines increasingly perform tasks once done by human hands. Marx envisioned exactly this future, recognizing how automation could dramatically reduce necessary labor time, the portion of our lives spent working just to survive. This technological revolution, he argued, held the potential to liberate humanity from mundane, repetitive labor, allowing people to pursue their full creative potential. Marx introduced a revolutionary concept he called the general intellect, humanity's collective, scientific, and technological knowledge, increasingly embedded not in individual workers, but in machines themselves. Production would become less dependent on immediate human labor and more reliant on this accumulated social intelligence encoded in technology. Yet Marx identified a fundamental contradiction in this technological advance. Capitalism depends on exploiting human labor to generate surplus value and profit. But as automation increasingly displaces workers, it erodes the very source of that surplus value. This creates a paradox. The drive for technological efficiency threatens capitalism's own foundation. He theorized this as the tendency of the rate of profit to fall. As capitalists invest more in machinery, what Marx called constant capital relative to human labor, variable capital, overall profit rates tend to decline. Why? because only living human labor can create new value. Machines merely transfer their existing value to products. This analysis, written over 150 years ago, resonates powerfully today as we grapple with artificial intelligence, automation, and widespread anxieties about technological unemployment. Marx's insights provide a crucial framework for understanding our current technological revolution and its profound implications for the future of work, capitalism, and human society itself. Technology's relentless advance, celebrated as the engine of progress, may contain within it the seeds of capitalism's undoing. As automation and artificial intelligence penetrate every industry, a profound paradox emerges that strikes at capitalism's very core. The foundation of capitalism, as Marx demonstrated, rests on extracting surplus value from human labor. But what happens when that labor becomes increasingly obsolete? When machines and algorithms render human workers superfluous across entire sectors of the economy? This is capitalism's automation paradox. The very drive for technological innovation undermines the system's fundamental principle of labor exploitation. As human workers are displaced, the source of surplus value, capitalism's lifeblood, begins to evaporate. Capitalists, compelled by competition, must invest in labor-saving technologies, yet collectively this drive threatens the profitability of the entire system. Consider the crisis of overproduction. Automation dramatically increases productive capacity, generating an unprecedented flood of goods and services. But with fewer employed workers and stagnating wages, who can afford to consume this expanding output? Underconsumption becomes inevitable, leading to market saturation and economic stagnation. Factories sit idle and warehouses overflow, even as human needs go unmet. For workers, the implications are severe. Automation creates not just increased productivity, but widespread displacement. Entire industries transform, leaving millions facing unemployment or precarious, low-wage service jobs. The nature of work itself changes, trending toward greater instability and insecurity. The promise of technological progress becomes entangled with the threat of economic precarity for vast segments of society. These contradictions, Marx argued, aren't temporary imbalances, but structural flaws within capitalism itself. Technological advancement, while holding immense potential for human liberation, becomes within a profit-driven system a force that destabilizes its very foundations. This brings us to a critical question. Can a system based on labor exploitation survive in a world where that labor is increasingly automated? Or does this technological revolution demand entirely new economic models that harness automation's benefits for all of society? Look around at the objects that surround us, each one a commodity seemingly possessing inherent value. But Marx reveals a profound mystification at capitalism's heart. Commodity fetishism, where complex social relationships between people transform into seemingly natural economic relationships between things. In the marketplace, commodities appear to have intrinsic worth, their value seemingly contained within themselves. A price tag dictates exchangeability, concealing a fundamental truth. Value isn't inherent to objects, but crystallized human labor, the time and energy of real people embedded in each commodity. This is the essence of the fetish. The social character of labor vanishes from sight, leaving commodities appearing as self-sufficient entities with natural rather than social properties. This mystification produces a profound inversion. Instead of humans consciously shaping their social world, commodities seem to take on a life of their own, dictating human interactions. Our relationships become mediated through the market, quantified by exchange values, expressed through the acquisition and consumption of things. Through reification, economic categories and commodities acquire human-like qualities, while actual human beings are reduced to mere cogs in capital circulation. The psychological impact is severe. Workers become alienated from their labor's products, from the production process itself, and ultimately from their own creative human potential. Work becomes merely a means to an end, their labor an appendage to the machine of commodity production. Cultural consequences follow. Commodity fetishism fuels consumerism, where identity, status, impersonal fulfillment are increasingly sought through material possessions. Advertising and marketing amplify this fetishism, perpetuating a system where genuine human needs are displaced by manufactured wants and authentic social connections are overshadowed by commodity relations. Marx's concept reveals how capitalism shapes not just economics, but consciousness itself, molding our perceptions, desires, and social relations through the mystifying power of commodities. By understanding commodity fetishism, we begin to see through the glittering surface of consumer culture to glimpse the human relations and social realities beneath, relations waiting to be recognized and reclaimed. As we weave together the threads of Marx's analysis in Das Kapital, we discover not just isolated economic theories, but a comprehensive critique of capitalism's inner workings. At its foundation lies the labor theory of value, the radical insight that commodities' worth stems from human labor, crystallized within them. From this flows the concept of surplus value, the keystone of capitalist exploitation, where capitalists extract unpaid labor from workers, the difference between value created and wages received. But capitalism's pursuit of accumulation isn't smooth or stable. Marx revealed how the system generates its own crises, not as accidents, but as necessary outcomes of its internal contradictions. Overproduction, underconsumption, and the falling rate of profit emerge as recurring symptoms of capitalism's inherent instability. These economic convulsions are driven by class struggle, the fundamental antagonism between bourgeoisie and proletariat that Marx saw as history's driving force. Through historical materialism, Marx's analytical lens, we see how material conditions and economic relations shape society's entire superstructure, from political institutions to dominant ideas. Remember the hidden abode of production, where violent processes of primitive accumulation created capitalism's prerequisites through dispossession and state power. Consider the Fragment on machines, where Marx prophetically outlined how automation, while potentially liberating, intensifies capitalism's contradictions by undermining its source of surplus value. Through commodity fetishism, we understand how social relations become obscured, appearing as relationships between things rather than people. These insights resonate powerfully today, from globalization's sprawling supply chains to widening inequality, from automation anxiety to consumer culture's seductive power. Marx's framework illuminates contemporary capitalism's dynamics. Das Kapital isn't just historical analysis, it's a living tool for understanding and potentially transforming the socio-economic system that shapes our world. Does Marx's Das Kapital, written in the crucible of the 19th century, still speak to our digital age? The answer is a resounding yes. From the hidden mechanisms of exploitation to the paradoxes of automation, from the subtle grip of commodity fetishism to the recurring nature of economic crises, Marx's analysis provides an invaluable lens for understanding our contemporary world. In an era of global capitalism, artificial intelligence, and rampant consumerism, his insights remain startlingly relevant. This journey through Das Kapital isn't merely an academic exercise. It's an invitation to critically examine the structures shaping our lives, to question the unseen forces at play, and to imagine alternatives for a more equitable future.